Hey Jeff, I have a question. It's really stupid, but when I get really bored, I play video games, right? And some of the video games, like video games, they're not like I don't know, it's like Call of Duty and all that kind of stuff. I know it's hypocritical to play it, but is it like I know it's killing, but it's a lesser degree, right?
Well, it's not killing, so we'll
Okay.
start there.
Okay.
You are leaving the imprint of familiarizing your mind with the act of killing. So,
Yeah.
you're kind of leaving those imprints and you're, reminding your mind again and again of, activities that aren't love and compassion, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you're leaving memories in your mind that are the opposite of love and compassion, but it isn't
Right.
killing because in order to kill, you have to actually separate a sentient being from, their life, right?
Oh, okay.
So yeah, you have to actually end one continuum of
Okay.
lifespan, right? So, whatever their
Yeah.
next life would be, is whatever, but in order to actually kill, you have to be the person doing or having ordered someone to do the killing of a sentient being that ends their life. Obviously that's killing.
Finish.
So
Yeah.
it isn't almost killed, it's actually the act of killing. So
Okay.
playing a video game wouldn't fall into that, but it would be familiarizing your mind with violence. Like it's just
Right.
meditation, right?
Yeah.
Like when we
Yeah.
do anything in life, meditation just means in Tibetan is the word gom, which
Yeah.
means
Familiarization.
familiarizing our mind.
Right.
Right? So what are
Yeah.
we familiarizing our mind with on a daily basis? Is it nonsense, or is it something that helps promote wisdom and helps promote our inner, quality of, being? What
Yeah.
is it that we're putting in? There's that saying, garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah.
If we're putting garbage in, then we're going to act later in that way. If we look at, behavioral results, right, of karma.
Yeah. Mm.
If we, had a previous life where we killed a lot or we're familiar with that, in the future, we may have those tendencies. So it may play, it could play a role, arguably,
Mm-hmm.
in a future of, having those tendencies in a future life. But who's to say? I don't have clairvoyance or even pretend to do so, but I'm just following the cause and effect according to how, Buddha presented how our actions have consequences. So,
Yeah. True
but
that.
yeah, it's a great question because we all do things all the time that are familiarizing our mind with, not the truth and not love and not compassion,
Yeah.
and we just have to look at how much of those things are, a distraction, you know, and how much are they reinforcing negative patterns that we're trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
Or undo. So anyway, that's how we kind of look at every day of our life and every moment of our life. And sometimes we
Right.
fail miserably and we familiarize ourselves with the things that we know, according to philosophy, will later make us unhappy. But that's, why we cycle in samsara, according to Buddha, is because of this ignorance that, finds pleasure in things that ultimately aren't really pleasurable. And actually lead to suffering because of the way we relate to them. But
Gotcha.
we'll get into all of that.
Yeah.
I just want to say welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on a Thursday night to listen about compassion, listen to the Dharma. It's very rare that, anyone anytime would want to take the opportunity to learn about such a thing. When you know all the things that you could have learned about tonight, you want to learn about how to care for others. So, that's a pretty neat thing. And we're all kind of here together in this room, wanting to learn how to care for others more. So if we, can kind of start with that aspiration, of that we're attending this teaching to learn how to care for others more, but to learn how to care for them in the ultimate way, to learn how, to become the ultimate caregiver. And that's what a Buddha is. It's a being who is the ultimate caregiver, who's practiced the things that we're learning about and practicing in order to get rid of self-cherishing. And the Buddha is the ultimate caregiver because the Buddha has no self-cherishing, has no imprints of self-cherishing. So it's for that reason that, if we can muster up that courage to think that, I'm here for everyone, not just for myself, I'm here for everyone. And somehow or another, that thought, when it changes from yourself to others, it broadens your ability to know, because of the loosening of your, not only loosening in terms of the understanding of the reality of the I, but when you loosen the self-cherishing, you start to kind of, loosen that thing that makes you even cling to it more. So it kind of has a coincidental effect that when you start to loosen that self-cherishing attitude, it's directly related to understanding the selflessness of the I when we look at the exchange. But we'll get into that later. That's what all of this teaching will be about. These series of teachings will be about all of the methods and techniques that are contained in the Drepung Losaling textbook from a general perspective on how bodhicitta arises. So without further ado, let's just try to get into a position that's kind of intentional, that we're intentionally getting into kind of a position of meditative posture if you want. If you don't want, you just sit normally how you would and listen to this talk. But if we're doing it from a Buddhist perspective, we want to try to leave as many imprints as we can, and do as many things as we can, because we're so distracted and so physical and mental. It's good to kind of put the physical into a state of intention, if you will. Obviously, it's driven by mental. I know that the physical doesn't think. That's not what I'm implying. But what I'm implying is that the mental kind of connects to the physical in such a way that we can clearly see by just getting hurt a little bit. We know that our mind experiences suffering, and alongside of that feeling. So we put a body in a posture of where we could put our legs in the Vajra posture if possible. That's not possible for me, but then there's also the half lotus posture, or just the regular cross-legged posture, or you can sit normally in a chair with your feet on the ground. All of these are fine. Ultimately, if we're looking at the best way to do it, would be in the posture of the Vajra posture, lotus position, it's also called. And this would be for later on down the road, later on lifetimes, even maybe, where we would need this posture. We're just leaving kind of imprints of this intentional posture. So it begins with the legs, and then goes to the hands, where we put our hands on our lap with our right on our left palm, kind of like this with our thumbs touching. You can also put them on your thighs, but the way I've been taught the 7-point Vairakana posture is that you put your right hands on your left with your thumbs touching, have your back very straight like a stack of coins, have your shoulders in a comfortable position, have your head slightly tilted down, and just in a comfortable way, not down like this, just kind of like in a nice posture where your arms are bowed, shoulders are in a comfortable position. So you have your legs, you have your hands, you have your spine, you have your shoulders, you have your head slightly tilted. Have your eyes slightly squinted, not wide open, not closed all the way. Kind of looking at the tip of your nose, so that your eyes aren't so wide open. They're looking at the room and they're ultimately distracted and exciting your mind, should I say. And your eyes aren't closed because our frame of reference when our eyes are closed is sleeping. And meditative concentration and analytical meditation is a state of clarity. It's not a state of dullness. It's not a state of sleepiness. So we want to make sure that we're setting up a meditative posture that kind of aligns with our mental goals, which are to have a kind of calm abiding eventually, a single pointed concentration that is free from excitability where the mind's busy or dullness where the mind's sleepy. It's somewhere in the middle of that and a point of clarity and single pointed concentration. So this is beginning to kind of physically do things that will aid in that adventure, if you will. It's a long adventure, so be patient with yourself as you're trying to gain these concentration states, because I certainly have not myself. So you look down at the tip of your nose, and then have your mouth in a comfortable position with your tongue on the rooftop. And it says that the reason that you can do that is so that you can allow the saliva in your mouth to kind of free flowly. It doesn't dry your mouth out. And it can also remind you with the tip on the tongue against your teeth to try to breathe through your nose only, to try to regulate the breathing. Those make 7 actual points. And sometimes it's called the 8 point because the breath is added. And that's what we're going to do today to just kind of get focused before we start the Heart Sutra. And then we'll get right into the discussion about Bodhicitta. But we get into this posture and then just focus on the breathing. Focus on it however you're comfortable focusing on it. Just bring the breath all the way to the top, meaning inhale all the way as far as you can through your nostrils, but do it in a very even way. Don't do it in a very forced, abrupt way. Do it in a very even inhale. And then when you get to the top of the breath, you could count it as 1 and then do an even exhale. And then if you have more graduated practices associated with the breathing, feel free to do that. But let's set our motivation first to kind of distract our minds from the distracted world that we're living in or maybe coming to this teaching from. And let's try to bring it to a place that's more reasonable and more neutral, focused on the breath. And then it becomes kind of like a fertile ground that we can grow all of this knowledge and good intention out of in a less distracted manner. So let's do go around maybe 3 times or so, the breathing, and then I will start with the Heart Sutra. And then we'll get right into the Bodhicitta teaching. And again, thank you everybody for coming. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice a profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice a profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind, consciousness, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as true, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ngala nyumbe ne jo namba ne nguje du ju nga yi du do jen zhu ba bo la ma yi bu shin zi ne zong gan ru zo lo sha zi lo ga sa ma re de sha na ru sa ma re be wa sa ma re de sa na Aga samare de janara samare me de ado on gade gade bara zangade badi zo baba ganja zanji gai tembe joji she loba doji meba doji shewa doji ragi baji me tembe je danji she din goye so ha ge ren don ja je jo she wa da me don no be jan dan de wa da don ba don jin bon zon zon jo ji ra ji de jan den da de le jo. And now we'll make a mandala offering. And there's some kind of fancy hand things, if anyone doesn't know how to do it, but really it's just representing, offering a perfect universe of perfection, a perfect world, as a almost like a gift, as a request for a teaching, and a request for blessing and request for teaching. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas High, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. Ra ri ni ni ye ma yi nan ye du mi o yi ro la ye la yo wa yo ye zo la ma dan ba ni nan yi ye ye ga la yin de yin yin yi ye da zang be do ye zi ma la za ye yu yi ya va lu so. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Gani Radayami. Nanye Jananda Ye Jananda Janju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Junyen Jibe Sonanji Rola Benji Sanje Jubajo Sanje Jodan Zoji Janamla Janju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Junye Jibe Sonanji Rola Benji Sanje Jubajo Sanje Jodan Zoji Janamla Chanju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Jishe Jibe Sonanji Rola Benji Sanje Jubajo. So thank you, everyone, so much for coming tonight to listen to this teaching on Bodhicitta. I feel so fortunate to have been able to have heard this from Rinpoche, and to be able, currently I'm going over it with the Dragpa Losaling's chanting master, Geshe Aga, and we've been going over it. It's kind of neat, a few days a week, and making sure that before this evening's teaching, now 2 times, that the outline that, and the outline of what I'm presenting is correct, and that the information, when it comes down to the final view in relation to the categories, is exactly correct. So Geshe Aga and I have been able to debate this a little bit and clarify any misunderstandings that I've had. because there are a lot of different kind of philosophies around this if you start to study it. And it's kind of like trying to get a hold of something very slippery. Once you start to learn about what this idea of a mind that, would want to become a Buddha, but here's the catch: it's for the sake of everyone. You don't leave anybody out. And I think that this is an important place to start before we get started with the teaching tonight. Is just talk a little bit about the understanding that serves as the foundation, and not to go on and on about it, because I know that a lot of you have a very firm foundation, but one truly needs to understand the Four Noble Truths in terms of one's own perspective in order to start to think about how one would relate to others in a full way. So once one starts to look at Buddha's Four Noble Truths, he or she'll find that the Buddha stated that, this is the superior truth of suffering. That what that meant is that a being who had, through various stages of concentration and understanding, a being saw what the nature of reality was, and was able to say, this is the accurate condition that beings are in. So this is the truth that I'm telling. So that's what that first noble truth is about. It's about a being who has realized the nature of what suffering is in a complete way. So in that first noble truth, when it says this is the superior truth of suffering, the Buddha is stating that, through various stages of concentration and learning, I've been able to directly perceive all that's wrong. So that's kind of where it begins, all of the pains, all of the sufferings. So one starts to investigate, do I have suffering? Do I have the suffering of suffering? When I break my arm, does it hurt? Do I have a suffering of change? When I get something, something brand new and I really love it, does it eventually turn into that old thing and become a form of suffering? So this item that we thought was a form of happiness becomes a form of suffering. Do we walk into a air-conditioned room sometimes, even, Rinpoche used to say, when we're very, very hot, and we get in there and it's like the most wonderful thing that we could ever experience. And within no time we're freezing, because we had sweat on our body, and now we're freezing. And now this place that we went to find so much happiness is now turned into a source of suffering. And we find that most of the things that we experience in our life are loaded with that, no matter how pure they seem to be, except for truth. And truth doesn't ever really let you down. It isn't always what you want to hear. It isn't always the most pleasant aspect of things, but it doesn't ever let you down, whereas all of these other things do. And then the Buddha also, because of, this foundation of this idea of beginningless lives and a endless continuum that we would have, posited certain things we would have to experience because of that. And the Buddha stated that this kind of third kind of suffering would be this pervasive compounded suffering, whereas all this stuff that I just mentioned, we're going to have to do again and again and again. So it's kind of interesting how, we have this, let me show you the things that you really do know about. And now I'm going to tell you, because I've seen the truth of reality through meditative absorption and et cetera, in a direct way. Now I'm going to tell you that there's a system that's making this occur, and there's this dissatisfaction isn't going to end until you break the cycle somehow. So one becomes thoroughly convinced of his or her own suffering, and then starts to say, how do I get rid of that cycle? And then the Buddha says, well, it's from the way you misperceive reality. And then because you misperceive things, this ignorance drives you into these states of attachment and hatred and desire. And then you act out physically and you yell and you create these imprints when you're doing all of these things that are called karma. And then this is planting in your consciousness and just getting ready to ripen into something concordant experience-wise. And that non-virtue was creating suffering, and virtue was creating happiness. And you were being thrust because of your ignorance again and again and again into this cycle of experience, sometimes happiness, sometimes suffering, because of engaging in sometimes virtue and sometimes non-virtue. And the Buddha said that it was all driven by ignorance, by looking at everything wrong. And then the Buddha said, but it can all end. And then the Buddha said, this is how, right? So the Buddha promised an ending. The Buddha said, I've seen this truth. I've directly perceived this truth. I have the cessation. I've ended my suffering forever. You can too, because I was no different than you. I wasn't like a special person. You know, I was just a sentient being with attachment, hatred, and desire. And through a series of lifetimes was able to get rid of those seeds and their imprints. But I only did it from the basis that is you. I didn't have something different than you. So let me tell you what I did. And that's what the Truth of Path was about. So the practitioner that's, you know, getting ready to start to do bodhicitta, right? To have this mind that's looking at all sentient beings has to first look at what one's own plight is and understand it very cleanly, to be able to then start to understand others' plight. And you can start to understand, when you really investigate, how thoroughly dissatisfying certain things are, and certain things are wonderful too. This isn't a negative outlook. This is just a reality outlook. And it's kind of negative to be ignorant about things, is it not? Because the ignorance is what causes us so much pain. So it's a realistic outlook about what our plight is. And then we look to those who we love so much first. And we say, oh my, that person's involved with that. Oh my, that person has that too. And we start to think, not only do I want to not suffer, but man, I wish they didn't have to either. And that's easy to do when we're talking about people we're very connected to and love. But those relationships aren't very stable either. You know, when we look at friends that become enemies and so forth, you know, the things that we cling on to as being so stable in terms of, this is my friend, this is my, this, you know, et cetera, you know, can't be certain. And we find something that's just so interesting when we look at, you know, how we relate to these different types of beings, our friends and our enemies, and those that are neutral to us, those people we walk by, we couldn't care less about, right? You know, we don't know them, we don't hate them, you know, but we could care less about them, you know? So when we look at our kind of reaction to those three types of beings, we see we have very kind of turbulent reactions that happen. Those we love, we can become like, oh my God, I want to help them. And those we hate are like, well, if they have to do another couple lifetimes in samsara, that's on them, you know, like we really have this very strong kind of reaction when we think of people we don't like. And it's almost like, you know, we're ready to abandon them. But then there's something very interesting and it's, you know, I think it's very moving when you read it, even though it's a little bit like maybe graphic, you would think. I don't know. I don't find it so. I find it more reality. But the Shariputra came upon a young couple. Okay, so there's a story from the sutras. Shariputra comes upon a young couple, and there's a child and a dog there. Okay, and the husband's eating some fish from a pond nearby that he caught. So the dog comes to try to get the fish bones, and he takes his stick and starts to hit the dog. And he beats the dog with a stick. So, but Shariputra has clairvoyance, right? Which isn't even like Shariputra in this context, you know, has the lower realizations, has the Hinayana vehicle realizations, but still, you know, has a very, very high level of clairvoyance, just not the omniscience of a Buddha. And getting even, this kind of clairvoyance we're talking about isn't something that's this huge feat. It seems like it, right? But it's actually quite easy. Sorry, Suma. Many of you all know Suma. She's probably barking at a squirrel that's coming to get us all. Hold on one moment, everyone. Sorry about that. So she didn't like maybe the story about the dog getting hit with a stick.
Definitely.
Even though Suma's never been hit with a stick. She used to get scratched a lot. You can see on the Facebook Tara Mantra where Rinpoche is using his back scratching stick to give Suma and Lamo massages. So that's the only sticking the dogs around here have ever gotten. But so anyway, Shariputra through his clairvoyance says, oh my gosh, this is a really strange drama that's taking place. What's really happening here? So Shariputra says, in fact, the fish was his father, the person's father, right? Reborn as a fish as a result of himself being a fisherman, okay? So the person who is eating this fish, his father was a fisherman. So he becomes a fish in his next life and his son catches him, right? There's a karmic connection, right? Because they have a karmic connection. We all think that like, oh, and we're just going to reunite. But look at the way karma really works. And this is the part that makes us want to get out also and makes us want others to be free, to know it's not the way we think it's going to work out. So Shariputra and the Buddha are saying, well, listen to this catch. You know, that fish that you're eating was your father. He liked fishing and killing fish, so he was born as a fish in the lower realm. And now you caught him because he was your father and you have this karmic connection. And the dog was your mother. And she was born through attachment to her offspring as a dog and then became your dog. So, and then it says, meanwhile, the wife is nursing a child who was in reality the reincarnation of their worst enemy who died, the family's worst enemy of all time. So now the mother is nursing a child and loving it more than anything. It was just a moment ago, just, a little while ago, same consciousness, was an enemy. And it says meanwhile, his wife was nursing, who was a reincarnation of the bitterest enemy, who was a former lover of hers. Just an added catch to the drama that's unfolding, and whom he had killed in jealousy, now reborn as her son because of attachment to her. So she previously has an affair, it's born as her son because of attachment and the bardo to this relationship. So it says, Shariputra says this and then remarks, he eats his father's flesh and beats his mother. She holds their mortal enemy in their lap. This wife is gnawing at her husband's bones, at samsara's features. Who wants to laugh? So when we start to look at this continuum of consciousness, and we realize that since beginningless time, we've had relationships with all sentient beings. We've had every varying relationship that we can imagine. But if we can somehow focus on the kindness, look at all the kindness that we see in our life right now. Every sentient being has been that kind to us and kinder. Every sentient being has been as kind as our teacher to us. So we have to start to develop a more realistic, according to this continuum of consciousness. If we believe in reincarnation, if we believe in future lives, and we believe in cause and effect, there's just a variety of karmas that are being created. So a variety of effects are being experienced. And we're each and every singular continuum is creating different varieties. So our varieties of experiences aren't always exactly going to align up and be the same at the same time. So we've had all of these varieties of relationships. So what we do is we start to become more realistic about how we relate to sentient beings, because we know our own suffering. We know how we then react when we think of someone we love having to experience that kind of suffering. Once we become we can taste it. Once we know what that first noble truth is and we can taste it and we wake up and we think about it, then we kind of know we're ready to talk about compassion for others, right? Because we know like we're going to be really motivated to help them get out of it, because we'll know what we want them to get out of. We'll know what we're taking, what we're taking away when we say, let's take on their suffering. We'll know what we're giving them when we say we'll give them our root virtues and happiness. We'll know what that means because we'll have studied that in terms of our own ability to emerge from suffering. So it's so important to have these foundations, and then we start to want to help others, but we'll see this blockade that happens when we get past our friends, our loved ones. Neutral's not too bad either, but it's hard to relate, right? It's hard to really care because we're so used to just like, I don't know her, I don't know him, right? We're so used to just like, you know, with the internet especially, you're looking at like, now we have this Tara Mantra Facebook page. It's like, you see who neutral is real quick when you're like, I don't know them, I don't know them, I don't know them, I don't know them, right? You know, and it's probably spam or whatever, but it's interesting to see like this reaction you have just ready to shuck off. And when we look at what serves as a fertile foundation for bodhicitta, it's called equanimity. It's the pre-step to bodhicitta. You know, it's the pre-step to any of the practices. And that is developing an equal desire to benefit three types of beings: friends, enemies, and neutrals. So what the meditation says to do, it says to first think about those people that you don't know who they are at all. You may even be able to get the picture of one, like you're in your mind, you walk by, like a neighbor you don't know, or, you know, something, there's somebody out there you can relate to with that. You know, so you start to think about what your reaction is to them, you know, and you just start to kind of understand how you're reacting to that person. You know, would you want to benefit them? You know, you just start to kind of see where that is at. Then you move on. You know, once you have this idea of, yeah, you know, I have this equal feeling towards this person. It's called the danyom. It's kind of equanimity. It also, there's another translation if I think of it, but it's very similar. It's kind of just an even approach, but it's not neutral. When you look at the definition in the Panchen Shittan, Panchen Sonam Dragpa's text, it talks about it, that it's this equal desire to benefit, not attached, you know, but yes, I will benefit them all equally. That's where you're trying to arrive at. So you start at neutrals. There's no real problem there because no, you know, things going to happen that's either too high or too low. And then you move over to your friends and you'll see fireworks take place. You'll see attachment. You'll see this like unbalanced reaction to them that you have to people you just kind of walk by and tell you that you don't know them on Facebook, right? So like you'll see a very, very different reaction in your mind, and you try to get it back down to a more realistic approach by doing the meditations of understanding that we've had beginningless lives, right? We've had all these varying relationships. Relationships aren't stable because they're impermanent, whether the relationship ends by them having to leave us in a sad way because they pass on, or them leaving us in an angry way because they storm out. Things are impermanent, or we hold on to it, you know, as long as we can, right? And we do try to hold on to it as long as we can, rather. But those are kind of the ways that it goes. Either one of us is going to pass away, or one of us is going to walk out, right? There aren't a whole lot more options. You know, we may lose touch, maybe it didn't walk out, but that's, you know, you could categorize it as that, right? So, you know, friends aren't as stable as we think they are. And we try to bring it down to this more reasonable place when in our meditation. So we start to kind of analyze this and say, all right, so it makes no sense to be attached more to someone that I right now like, right? Than someone that I'm neutral with, because the person that I right now like, I might not like later, you know, and look at the highest likes. Anybody who's, you know, even like had relationships or divorces, or think about the highest like you thought was a like that ends up not, you know, a like, you know, so you see the instability that can happen so easily just in our everyday common experiences. So we try to get more realistic, not saying, hey, I know that person is going to not be my friend. It's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to loosen that attachment and trying to get it to the point where we would feel the same way about wanting to help them as we would someone neutral. Now is where the rubber meets the road. The next part is where we move on to those we find distasteful and who we consider our enemies. Now, it's fine. I don't have any enemies. It doesn't have to be like an arch enemy like Superman, right? And, or Batman that has some arch enemy like the Joker. It could be someone that you find distasteful or that really grinds you the wrong way. How much do you want to help them versus the way you did a minute ago when you thought of someone you cared about so much? You see that it's a lot easier to help the neutral when you look at, wanting to be of benefit, of help. It's a lot easier to do that. And it's super easy to do the friend. You just don't have a really realistic way with it. But the enemy, it becomes hard. But when we look at this instability of relationships that we just talked about, we have so many examples where enemy becomes a friend in this life, right? Someone we thought we misunderstood maybe. And then we realize, oh, we just misunderstood you and we become friends. We've all had things like that happen and go each and every way. And if we start to look at, we have beginningless lives, right? And Rinpoche always used to say, before we get to bodhicitta, we have to have, this idea of beginningless lives and equanimity. Why do we need this idea of beginningless lives? Well, to really get a good, realistic relationship with our friends, enemies, and neutrals, we'll see that those labels don't even work anymore in terms of solidity, because if this moment's consciousness is caused by a previous moment's consciousness, caused by a previous moment's consciousness, we will not find a beginning. And we'll know it's a lot more than the 50 years I've been here. So what happened, okay, I'm in a womb. I got 9 months, 50 years and 9 months or something, probably something like that. Then what? I have a previous moment consciousness. Well, Buddhism would say there's an intermediate state that's kind of between, births. And then there's a previous birth that we have, a previous existence that we have. Buddhism, breaks it down into these 6 realms of potential, lower realms and higher realms. Believe it or not, we're in the higher realms, but, it is broken down in such a way that these, I lost track. I've lost my train of thought. I apologize for that. But we see that these friends, enemies, and neutrals, when we start to trace back previous life, previous life, previous lives, we'll find there's a beginningless lifespan. We'll find that if we just do mathematics, simple mathematics and possibilities, if we see how these, experiences are brought about, they're brought about by previous actions. Virtue causes happiness, non-virtue causes suffering. And Buddhism believes that these actions that we do that plant these imprints for experience can ripen into, 10 lifetimes later. It doesn't mean because I'm nice this lifetime, I'm going to get an ice cream cone in my next one. I might not get the ice cream for 10 more lifetimes. So I'm really trying to kind of close the gap on that, and trying to get it so that, it's all virtue. And then eventually that's what a Buddha is, only virtue and only wisdom. And we see when we start to look at, the potential for this beginningless rebirth and this endless stream of consciousness. And we see, according to the Four Noble Truths, that there's a way that we can end our suffering. And then we start to look at others and we want to end theirs. And then we want to end, neutral suffering, friends suffering, and neutral suffering, and then enemy suffering, however it's more comfortable. It goes back and forth in different ways, depending on whether it's for equanimity or for all sentient beings as our mothers. So you'll look at the Lamrim Chemo for the guided details on the meditations and the order of friends, enemies, and neutrals versus enemies, friends, neutral, etc. So the meditations are there in the Great Treatise. And the stages of the path to enlightenment. So you have these two foundations of these understanding of karma and its results, understanding of beginningless lives, understanding that you have to experience it, understanding how you could end it, understanding that everyone's in the same predicament. And then you get to the point where you understand that all those people in the same predicament, your friends, enemies, and neutrals are really all people that you want to bring happiness to, you equally want to benefit them. And once you get to a place where you could equally want to benefit all sentient beings, you have this immeasurable kind of idea that you would, want to benefit them, then, or at least, a facsimile thereof, right? A foundation of it, because these things all kind of work together. If you look at some of the meditations to reinforce each other. If it's a contrived form of this understanding, that's totally fine, because we're doing contrived forms of bodhicitta, of mind that wants to become enlightened. And we'll learn all about that in just a moment. But I just wanted to give a kind of a brief introduction to some of the necessities of knowing. And those are nowhere near the number of things that are necessary to know in order to really get bodhicitta. And we'll talk about what that is in a second. But it's a good start to understanding that we need to know the Four Noble Truths and understand them, what they are, the predicament that we're in, and then to know the predicament everyone else is in, and to know, if we want to free them, what we're freeing them from, etc. So we'll define this a little bit better. So the general meaning of perfection is by Panchen Sonam Dragpa. Panchen Sonam Dragpa is the textbook writer for Drepung Losaling and Ganden Shartse and some other monasteries. The Ganden Shartse and Drepung Losaling share Panchen Sonam Dragpa. Panchen Sonam Dragpa was the abbot of he was, I think, the 15th Ganden Tripa, holder of the Galupa lineage, and he was the abbot, which was very special, of 3 monasteries, of Ganden Sera and Drepung. So he was at one time abbot of all those. And he has 14 volumes of works, and he's an incredible scholar and has a very distinguished view on emptiness and a very, very clear way of elucidating topics. And as you'll see, whenever we get done with this class on bodhicitta, you will know what bodhicitta truly is beyond the shadow of a doubt. Not because of me, because of Panchen Sonam Dragpa passing it down to another student, to another student, to another student. I think it's the late 1500s, right? So passing it down, eventually to Khenser Geshe Wandak, and then Rinpoche passing this teaching along to me multiple times. And then now what is really beautiful, and lineage is so important, and lineage isn't important to be sectarian, but lineage is so important because when I'm really looking for an answer, I'm trying to find out what Tsongkhapa's view on it is. When there's a group of people who all are trying to find out the same thing, and trying to arrive at the final view in the same kind of way through a similar lens, it makes it really easy to have kind of a reference person if there are scholars in the world of your tradition. And it's so wonderful that in the tradition that Rinpoche was part of, Drepung Losaling, whatever you want to label it as. I don't really like labels, because if you say Galupa, then it's like, well, Galupa was formed by Tsongkhapa, who studied all of the 3 Nyingma, Kagyu, and Sakya, and the Indian Pandits. So it's, if you look at where Tibetan Buddhism came from, it was Nalanda tradition of Nagarjuna and, Asanga and everyone. So, are we Nalandas? And where did their tradition come from? Buddha. And so we've started this thing we call Buddha's Center, because it's really it. That's all we're trying to do, is figure out the stages of the path according to Buddha, not according to a sect or a tradition. We are looking at it through a particular lens because, you have a teacher and your teacher has a teacher and your teacher has a teacher. Hopefully what you learn, you use your own brain and you analyze it, and you can even question your teacher. Last night, we were listening to Venerable Chodron, and she said, yeah, if she hears something in a dark, she will question her teacher. We should question it. This teacher is not like some God that's sitting there, some like, I really encourage everyone to listen to Venerable Chodron's. I only heard the second session. I'm sure the first session was extremely wonderful, but the second session she got into the relationship with the teacher and when the teacher passes on. And she said some really incredible things that I think that people would really, really like to hear. And she said something so interesting. She said, when the Lama passes, a lot of things fall apart and people become like really, everyone reacts so very differently. She was saying people disrobe and because a Lama is such a powerful force of virtue in the universe, when they leave, things misalign for a minute and start to get, people start to feel, the effect of losing a bodhisattva in the world. Everyone arrives at their feelings differently and has different reactions to it. But she was saying when Trijung Rinpoche died, Geshe Nawan Darje gave a teaching that day to them and glowing, like with no problem. And Nawan Darje was a root disciple of Trijung. But then Lama Yeshe, I believe, she said Lama, she must have been referring to Lama Yeshe. If I'm misspeaking, I'm sorry. They did Guru Puja and he cried the whole time. Both practitioners totally realized being. Kirchup J, Joseph J, students of Lama Tsongkhapa, both had totally different reactions to Tsongkhapa's passing. Kirchup J was sad all the time and used that sadness to do practice in Tantra. And then Joseph J, was able to have a little bit more confidence. But it's beautiful to have this lineage. And the reason I'm going on and on and on about this is that I was, on the phone with Geshe Aga, who he and I made a pact about 20 years ago that we would work together on. It's really amazing how this is like naturally it just happened. He's like, we're in the future, we're going to talk about debate and we're going to talk about, Lamrim, and I really want to bring these topics into the West with you. Promise. I said this like 20 years ago in the kitchen at the old center to Aga while we were doing we were making bread or something, because in my mind he has flour all over his shantup. And we were talking about this, and I asked him if he would do this. And so I've been consulting him on the framework of this text, and we went over some super difficult points yesterday. And he didn't have his book in his hand, so we were debating and we were going through it. And there's a very, very fine point where there's a distinction between, we'll get into it, Svatantrika, Madhyamika, and Prasangika. And he presented in a way, and he called me back this morning. He said, "Are you busy? Are you busy?" And I was like, "What's going on?" No, I'm not. I'm like running down the stairs. He's like, "Go get the Parshin Shitun." So I went and got the text. He called me and he's like, "We've got to go over this part. I've got to explain." I was explaining it according to the Svatantrika view in Joseph Dharma Rinchen's commentary. But I went and, looked further at the text, and, I don't know, because he promised me if he couldn't find it himself in the text, he would go find the greatest, any geshe that he could, who could explain it. So that's kind of our deal. So he called me back and he said, here are these distinctions. And it's really neat. And you'll see it in this teaching, and I'll point it out when we get to these parts. So Panchen Sonam Dragpa, he says, when we look at Bodhicitta, so what is Bodhicitta? It's this idea that I want to become a Buddha. So that's the aim. And what's the purpose for the sake of sentient beings? So there's these kind of two thoughts that emerge as one. I want to be a Buddha. So obviously you have to know like what a Buddha is. Why would you want to be that? What can they do I can't do? You need to know kind of all these things. Like if you are, entering into this idea, you want to study Mahayana Dharma, you would probably want to know what that is if you are an intelligent person, right? So you want to know, like, what is this Buddha you want to become? So you study what a Buddha is. And we can talk about that another time. The Lamrim Chemo gives a great explanation of what a Buddha is and the excellent qualities of body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. So you figure out what a Buddha is, and you say you want to be that being, and you want to do it. You want to become that for everyone's sake. And why do you want to do that for everyone's sake? Because the Buddha is omniscient and can truly figure out how to help everybody in the most intelligent way, without this kind of self-cherishing mixed in and pretending to be selfless with a little bit of grasping, coupled with kind of kindness. Like the Buddha has this pure omniscience that is able to understand ultimate and conventional reality at the same time, whilst having this love for all sentient beings without exception, without any kind of leanings, right? The Buddha doesn't lean towards one or another. The Buddha couldn't carry out an action in a crowd unless he or she knew that that action he or she would do would benefit everyone in the crowd somehow or another. So the Buddha isn't taking, and there's no favorites, there's no, the Buddha may see that, half the people in the crowd may become Buddhists quicker, so that, let's shoot at those people so that those 50 people, if there's 100, can help the other 50 people more, and it's not just me doing the work, right? A Buddha's omniscient and can see a lot more stuff than we can. So we have to understand that we're trying to become a being that is only trying to figure out in any given relationship or interaction, how he or she can be of utmost benefit to that being to get them to the place that they are as quick as possible. Like the fastest route. So the Buddha's saying, oh, out of omniscience, knowing everything, not omnipotence, can't change your karma, right? Can't come and, the Buddha doesn't wash away sins with water. The Buddha doesn't remove suffering with her hands. The Buddha doesn't, give you his or her realizations. The Buddha teaches the Dharma, right? And teaches you how to liberate yourself, teaches you the truth, it says, and that's all that we can do is look at the truth. So this is a mind, what we're trying to figure out how we get, this what this class is about. How do you get bodhicitta? How do you get this thing that aims at becoming a Buddha for the sake of everyone? And when we say everyone, we've already established that there's this equal desire to benefit everyone, friends, enemies, and neutrals. So we've got to change our relationship with all beings. And when we look at how many beings we have to change that relationship with, we're only thinking about those enemies, right? The negative relationships we've had in this life. Well, what about the last life, right? So we really have quite a lot of work to do in terms of turning around our kind of thought in relationship to others. And the Buddha says there's so many of these beings, so many sentient beings that your little minds can't even count them, and all we can see is bugs and us and animals and stuff, right? We can't see all these other realms Buddha talks about. And we can't possibly think there's only what we can see, because science finds stuff new all the time, right? That they say, oh, you couldn't see this before, now you can see this now, and so forth. So we can't say that right now we're standing in the final view of what is out there, right? We know we have people trying to discover life on other planets right now. We have other people who are scientists who believe that it's kind of preposterous that we may be the only things out there, and us and the cats, dogs, and cows and worms, and then today or we see this new black hole discovered, right? Which kind of like, and let's not get into physics, but this kind of, you start to see how reality can change just like this and shift, and how time and everything is, up in the air in terms of, how we think it is and how it, how we relate to it. So let's not get into science. I'm not a scientist, nor am I going to start studying quantum mechanics and quantum physics. We'll leave that to those who are very interested in that. I'm very interested in the Lamrim and the more traditional topics, but that just might be my small scope in terms of having blinders on and trying to figure out what I need to do as this being to get out, because I believe it, right? You don't have to convince me. I don't have to be qualified by someone else. I don't have to, be like, yeah, you're smart. I don't need any of that. I believe in what the Buddhas are saying. Like, I don't need to be qualified or, validated. The lamas have validated it for me. Maybe it's blind or something, but the lamas have validated it for me. So now I'm just really interested in how to change this mind that's so sullied and acts like, and makes me act out in ways that I don't want to, how to fix that. And that's what we're doing tonight. So Panchen Sonam Dragpa says that the bodhicitta, when we look at the categories, there's 5 categories: base, cause, nature, division, and the benefits of it. So we went over this a little bit last time, but we'll go over it again just real quickly in a little bit speeded up style. And anybody who has questions or needs more points to it, we can go over that later on. So when we look at bodhicitta, the mind that wants to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings, there are 2 divisions of that when we look at it proper. There's aspirational bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. So in Panchen Sonam Dragpa's text, it begins by saying that and dividing it into those categories. It says we're going to, go over bodhicitta. The lamas always have a text in front of them. My teachers always did, to not assume they know in case they forget something, just out of and I'm probably more inclined to forget something than them. So I just want to get to the section in the text before we start kind of ripping through it. So here we are. So it says, first of all, we have these 5 categories. And when we look at bodhicitta, we can start with the first category of base. So there's physical base and mental base. And what kinds of bodhicitta are there? There's 2 that we're looking at this point: aspirational bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. Aspirational bodhicitta is the first moment that you have the realization that you want to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. Now, this isn't just a thought you just had, like, hey, I'd like to do that, and you just thought it. This is not it. This is something that now becomes a mind that doesn't go away. Day and night, that's all every action that you engage in is for the sake of sentient beings. You no longer are doing things selfishly in that sense. You still have self-cherishing, you're not a Buddha, but you're really trying your best to do everything for everybody else at that point, day and night, and it's without a break. It's a mind that's always there. For the most part, you can lose it at a very beginning stage. We'll talk about that later. But it's once you get past the very beginning stage of that realization that's continuous, unless something majorly strange happens where you lose faith or you keep that until you're a Buddha, and it carries on until you're a Buddha. So that is the aspirational sort. And engaged bodhicitta is someone who has aspirational bodhicitta that then takes the vow, the Bodhisattva vow, and engages in the 6 perfections. So we'll leave it at that for now. So what is the physical base? Who can get bodhicitta? So we're starting out with aspirational bodhicitta, just the arisal of this mind that wants to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings, that is always that for the most part from then on, right? So we just have to be clear on how big this mind is. This mind is carried by someone who already has renunciation, someone who already has a desire to emerge from cyclic existence. They want to definitely get out for themselves. They already have this realization, and then they start to look at others getting out. And that's why I talked about the importance of the Four Noble Truths for a bodhisattva, right? Even though it's considered the first turning of the wheel in a Hinayana teaching, not a Mahayana teaching, you can't speak of getting bodhicitta without the first turning of the wheel, and which is a Mahayana teaching. So we see how all paths lead to Buddhahood. They're either, preparatory pathways, pathways that one sentient being specifically needs at that time to get to enlightenment. The Buddha taught a variety of different things in order to ripen individuals. So anyway, when we look at this physical base of this mind that can emerge, who can get it? So it says in the text that anyone in the 6 realms of cyclic existence, so you ask, can my, dog Suma get bodhicitta? The answer is yes. Can a hell being get bodhicitta? The answer is yes. Well, how do we justify any of this talk? Well, in the previous life stories of Buddha, he was like this short being in hell, the story goes, And he saw that his friend, who he was in hell with, was suffering immensely. And he was already training on the path, but he hadn't developed bodhicitta yet. And even if he had, we'll get to that, hadn't developed bodhicitta yet, and had karma ripened that put him in hell. He had compassion and, some kinds of compassion that he had developed in previous lifetimes, right? But those were just imprints that were ready to ripen into some kind of a result. And what happened is this previous life of Buddha, he was in this hell realm, and he sees his friend is suffering so badly, and he says, oh my God, I'm going to take on that being's suffering. And that right there undoes kind of this veil that's covering up these previous realizations this being had. We look at this continuum of consciousness. We have all kinds of stuff hanging around in here. We're just waiting to be connected with. In this case, the Buddha was just about to become a bodhisattva, but he was actually in hell because of misdeeds he had previously committed. And if, the karma and the afflictions are there, you're going to have a result, and the conditions are there, you'll have the result. The causes are there, the conditions are there, result will follow. Fact, cause and effect 101. And so the Buddha, develops this compassion and develops this bodhicitta in hell, the desire to free all sentient beings, become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, connects to these previous seeds. And at that moment of taking on this kind of work away from his friend to try to take away his suffering, this karma is relieved, and he's the evil person wherever he is, the guard, if you will, hits him on the head, and he goes to the higher realms, and then begins to experience the bodhisattva life, right? Because the line of demarcation between not a bodhisattva and a bodhisattva is, have you gotten bodhicitta? Any being in any of the 6 realms of cyclic existence can get this first aspirational bodhicitta. And it says that you have stories that there's Luchini, 20,000 Nagas that had the mind that aspires to enlightenment emerge. In sutras, you find all these quotes that are being presented. Then there's another quote that says in the King of Nagas Sutra that 72,000 Nagas achieve that. So if we can say that beings in these Naga or snake realms, if anybody's not aware of what a Naga is, it's like a forest creature, if you will. Yeah, not important. So if all these beings and hell beings, according to Buddha's previous lives, and the Buddha directly perceived all his previous lives, when he became omniscient. So the Buddha is not like just telling a story, even though it was his last life. It's like telling a story like yesterday for us, because the Buddha is omniscient. So the Buddha is saying, oh yeah. I remember I was in hell. I was trying to help my friend, and I had this previous relationship with karma and karma of love and compassion, and it suddenly like hit me and hit me because of previous imprints, and I wanted to help that being, and I wanted to help all beings, and suddenly I was a bodhisattva. So it can happen in any of the realms of cyclic existence, but it requires like preliminary stages. It isn't something that just arises out of nowhere, and we'll learn about that later. So the physical base for that is any of the 6 realms. What's the physical base for this engaged bodhicitta? This is where it gets tricky. And because in the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, in Atisha's text, there is a quote that it then becomes a hugely debated point in the monasteries. And it talks about who can take a bodhisattva vow. So Atisha's quoted as saying that, so it talks about, there's this aspirational vow, and then there's the vow of engaged vow and the bodhisattva vow, right? So this engaged bodhicitta, and according to Kamala Shila, how do we, differentiate between, as I said before, aspirational and engaged bodhicitta? It's the Bodhisattva vow. Once one, just as a technical note, once one has the generation of aspirational bodhicitta, he or she is on the Mahayana path of accumulation. The Mahayana path of accumulation has 3 stages: small, medium, and great. Once he or she takes the Bodhisattva vow, they move to the medium level of the path of accumulation. There's other stuff going on too. It's not just about bodhicitta. There's a lot of stuff about 4 awarenesses and so forth that are going on. But there's, this kind of transition from aspirational bodhicitta to engaged bodhicitta. And what happens is once one reaches the medium stage of the path of accumulation of Mahayana, they can't lose their bodhicitta. So according to the Prasangika view, according to scholars, from that point on, when bodhicitta is there, it's engaged bodhicitta once a bodhisattva has a bodhisattva vow. So in Atisha's text, it says that those who maintain any of the 7 kinds of individual liberation vow have the ideal prerequisite for the Bodhisattva vow, not others. So then we'll take this down kind of the discussion that Geshe Aga and I are having. Okay, so according to that statement, some would say, so there a lot of scholars interpret it in all of these different ways. So let's look at all the ways, and then you decide what you like, and I'll bring you to where we conclude, and you can see what you think about that conclusion. So the individual liberation vow refers to the 7 kinds of vows. We'll quickly go through them. The 2 kinds of vows for householders, the male and female, exactly the same vow. Novice monk and nun vow. The probationary nun vow, and fully ordained monk and nun's vow. So there's 7 individual liberation vows that are lifetime vows. Those can only be taken by a human being. So if we take this literally, this means that only a human being can get a bodhisattva vow, right? So if we take this literally to mean that, we can, some scholars do, to take this to mean that you have to have this prerequisite of one of those 7 kinds of individual liberation vows. And the best would be that of a fully ordained person. So the best possible position would be that of a fully ordained person. So when we look at the different scholars and we look at the different ways of looking at it, we'll see that in a commentary on the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, it distinguishes between, it makes it clear what Atisha's getting at. Atisha's getting at that the best possible basis, because he's talking to humans, right? The best possible basis to have is one who has any among those 7 individual liberation vows. The best possible basis within that would be someone who is fully ordained, because it's someone who's day and night working at these goals, not going to work, and trying to handle life. They're only trying to work at these goals, so it makes sense why someone totally focused is, more ideally qualified to practice, things you have to memorize and so forth than, someone like myself, and so forth. So a fully ordained person is, fully immersed in this study of this and understanding of this. So it's understandable. But this commentary says in the desire realm gods and some form realm gods, yes, can take the Bodhisattva vow too. And it says that and it says specifically, not just take it again or, later on a Bodhisattva gets it again. It says in the text that it's the new arisal of this vow and the new arisal of engaged bodhicitta are the same thing. So when we say when someone's engaged bodhicitta has the first arisal of engaged bodhicitta, we say they have the first arisal of the bodhisattva vow. And it says in these texts that, Atisha is not saying only that. Atisha is saying the best is that. And the commentary says, yes, others can as well. And it says, but not generally in the lower realms. And when we see references to rabbit bodhisattvas, those aren't real rabbits. You know, there's a sutra, or I don't know if it's a sutra, maybe in the Jataka tales, with the rabbit that's teaching the all of the animals in the forest. You know, the story goes like this, and then a god shows up and wants to eat him, and he offers him his body, and we say, you know, and there's some idea that there's a bodhisattva vows or something maybe that have been given. You can look the story up and look further into it. This was not the point of it, but you can see that even when we look at the commentaries, they say that when the bodhisattva, you know, you see these bodhisattvas in animal realms and so forth, the bodhisattva only emanates or does anything for the sake of benefiting others. And in order to take a bodhisattva vow, you have to understand what it means. You have to understand there's 18 root, 46 secondary vows. You have to, in your mind, have this constant refrain, right? And you have to know what you're constantly refraining from, and to try to teach that, you know, how do you do that in, you know, like animal language, or I don't know what Hell and Hungry Ghost language is like, or how they even have the time to talk, right? If you read about it, you know, how they even have the time to talk. But you see that there are some more faculties in the higher realms that leave it as this opportunity. So where we land is that this bodhisattva vow, when we kind of grind it up, and this is part of the phone call this morning, is that in the human basis, the best version is any among those 7 kinds, best version, fully ordained. But also these other kinds of beings, and even one could argue if it's possible for desire realm gods to do it from the basis of what I'm about to say, a human could too, from the basis of the abandonment of things such as the 10 non-virtuous activities. So a god, for instance, could abandon the 3 non-virtues of the body, killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, 4 non-virtues of the speech, lying, divisive speech, gossip, and harsh words, and abandon 3 of the mind, harmful intent, covetousness, and wrong views, right? So they can engage in the ethics that abandons those virtues, and that would serve as the ethical foundation that's necessary for the Bodhisattva vow. So there's a lot of possibilities, and it's necessary to have virtue in order for it to be a fertile field. There's all these other causes and conditions that we're going to learn about later, but this virtue of the individual liberation and this kind of sutra, I don't want to say sutra because bodhisattva vows are sutra, but kind of this common, you know, presentation of ethics that would be common to those who have vows and don't have vows. If one can engage in that common abandonment, it says that that can serve as a basis without having formally taken an individual liberation vow, and only humans can take an individual liberation vow. And the individual liberation vow ends when your life ends. It doesn't carry forward, yet the bodhisattva vow does. So when we pass away, if we actually have gotten a bodhisattva vow, it means we are a bodhisattva. We'll learn about that in a bit. And you know, you can't get a bodhisattva vow if you're not a bodhisattva. It's not real. It doesn't happen. You get a faith in it. You get facsimile of it, but you don't receive a bodhisattva vow unless you're a bodhisattva. But you can have this facsimile that aligns you with the real one later that occurs. But you don't actually get that bodhisattva vow unless you're that. So the next basis, the next level that we're going to talk about is the mental base. So the physical base for aspirational bodhicitta, any among the 6 realms of cyclic existence. The mental and for engaged bodhicitta, the physical base is really beings in the higher realms, not all the higher realms, because if we want to get fancy and talk about the form, the desire realm, form, and formless realm, obviously, there, you know, we have to debate, question, formless realm, there's no sound, right? How could you get a bodhisattva vow? How could you have a new arisal of such a thing? So that doesn't really make sense. So we say the higher realms is really the physical base where you can get that. And what's the mental base that has to happen? And I'll read through these and then we'll just go to question and answer. because I've talked about a lot of things, and we'll go through this text slowly. I've gone over a couple of weeks with the Geshe myself, knowing this material, more hours than we're going to put in the last 2 sessions, and in a shorter amount of information. So I think that we can go over this slowly, and then we'll really all know what we're talking about. If someone says, what's bodhicitta? Then we can answer them, because it's part of our responsibility, as Venerable Chodron said, to carry on Rinpoche's lineage, to carry on what we can in his students in our whatever way, with all the humility possible, and to say, like, I may not be anywhere, I may be like a fingernail on my teacher, but at least I have his fingernails amount of good to give you. And if I'm not giving that, I'm being miserly, and it doesn't mean we all have to go start teaching all of a sudden, but it's like, we interact with folks all the time and can clarify Dharma all the time, and can interact with people and show them, what an example of somebody who's practicing these things could be. And, you see, why are you people like, man, why are you so happy? Or why are you, so this or that? And then you can talk to them about these things, not in the detail of definitions, definiendums, and, divisions, but you sort through this because you know it so well. You don't have to think about it, you know it, and then you can use your skillful means on how to use it. And that's what it's about. When you know this stuff beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's second nature, and then it's just putting the skillful means in there to figure out how to help people and how to be most effective. It's really interesting. So the mental base, what kind of mental base? So these are the physical bases, a mental base. So first you need faith, which is focused on the Buddha. So you have to have faith. So you have to know what a Buddha is, and you have to have this faith. You get that at the stage of refuge, right? In the small scope of the teachings, the smallest scope of the teachings, you establish who the Buddha is and why the Buddha is an object of faith. So here you have this faith that's focused on the conqueror, and you have compassion that's focused on sentient beings. So you'll see the mental base that's necessary, like I said about the Buddha when he was in hell in a previous life as a bodhisattva, not a bodhisattva, about to be a bodhisattva. There was this compassion as a base that was allowed to just kind of be shown, that ripened into that bodhicitta. So when we look at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta, we'll get into later, one of the cause, the final causes is great compassion. And when we look at Chandrakirti's Madhyamika Avatara, it says homage to great compassion. Why is homage to compassion, not to bodhicitta? And it says that compassion, is either when we look at the pathway, compassion causes bodhicitta, so compassion is a result and causes and makes things occur. Compassion is a result of love, and wanting to repay kindness, and thinking that beings were kind, and thinking they could have had all these relationships of kindness with you. All of these things are required in order to get to bodhicitta. So compassion, which is focused, has as an object of observation sentient beings. And then next, the perseverance that endures the hardship of a bodhisattva. You have to have this effort. You have to, have this continuous perseverance. You already have renunciation, right? So you're day and night trying to get out of cyclic existence. So you have to have this perseverance that's willing to endure whatever it takes to get to your goal, which is Buddhahood for the sake of everyone. And then you just have to have a general faith. And we'll get into what all of those mean next time. And that would conclude. And then second, so that is in relation to both kinds of bodhicitta, but really we could do it like this. We could say, in order for the arisal of bodhicitta to happen, we have to have all of these things that are just mentioned, all of these mental bases. So in order for aspirational bodhicitta to arise, we have to have these mental bases. But in order for engaged bodhicitta to arise, we have to have had the arisal of aspirational bodhicitta, right? Which required this mental base. So one can't have the arisal of engaged bodhicitta without aspirational bodhicitta. So when I said show to Geshe Aga, posit that which is the mental base for the engaged, the person with, for the new arisal of engaged bodhicitta, what's the mental base? And he said the Mahayana path, the small level, the Mahayana path of accumulation. which is the generation of aspirational bodhicitta. So that's the mental base, that mind that aspires to enlighten for the sake of sentient beings. That's the base that was brought out by faith that is focused on the Buddha, focused on sentient beings, this perseverance, it's willing to do whatever, and this kind of general faith that occurs. So that is the breakdown on some of that. And just as a taste of some of the other interesting parts is, how does bodhicitta then go to your next life? How does a bodhisattva vow carry on to your next life? And this is another point of clarification. He called me, Geshe-la called me, he said, I gave you the view according to Joseph J. And Joseph J. was interpreting it at the Svatantra Madhyamika level, which is just one level below the perfect explanation. And he said, but, then the perfect explanation is this. So what does Joseph say? And what's, the low? So Joseph gives it according to the second highest school down into the mind-only school and so forth. So Joseph says, and it says in our text that there's this kind of protector, this protection that is manifesting continuously in our mind. It's like a promise that's just continuously kind of there. It's like this continuous intention to abandon. What are you abandoning? The things that the bodhisattva is abandoning. This continuous intention. So it's this consciousness, this continuous thing. And that's the lower view. And the higher view is that it is a form that's actually in your consciousness. And that would carry on even in the subtle consciousness, and when the subtle winds carry forward into your next life. The Bodhisattva vow isn't a vow of form that ends like the individual liberation vow. It's a vow that carries on to a future lifetime. That's what's special about it. Once you get this, you've got it. Once you get a bodhisattva vow, a real one, because you're a bodhisattva vow, you have it. And then you really can go to work, and you really can know what sentient beings need, and you can start to, be a lot more helpful to them. So that's what this is all about. This is about, learning how in our daily life to act like a bodhisattva, because we only have our daily life to work with. We know how to act like a bodhisattva by learning how a bodhisattva acts. And the more familiar we become with acting like a bodhisattva, the more our mind will be able to convert from a mind that only thinks of ourselves to one that cherishes others and wants to become fully enlightened for them all. So anyway, that's the end of this talk. Does anybody have any questions? I know it's 8:56. We said we'd end at 9. I won't go too far over, but I also know, because of death and impermanence that I've studied, that none of us know if we're going to be here tomorrow. None of us know if we're going to be here in an hour. Many of us have had to experience so much loss over the last few years, or however many years you want to look back on the losses that we've had to experience. And I know the most recent loss that I had of Rinpoche, even though I studied death and impermanence, really, really blindsided me. Yeah. Yes, Priscilla. I don't want to get emotional, so I'm just cut it right there.
Okay. So instead, I can get emotional. I just wanted to clarify something from last week. Well, I want to thank you. So 2 things I want to say. I want to thank you for honoring my lifelong study of Buddhism, which really started in childhood. So I wanted to thank you for that. But I also want to mention to people that for the greater portion of that time, the study was academic. It's not like I was a Buddhist practitioner all that time. So I just wanted to clarify, it's not like I've had these years and years and years of Buddhist study and I'm, qualified for this, that, and something else. And I've taught meditation, but it has been to a lay crowd. It was not, actually it was to psychotherapy clients primarily, helping them to manage emotionally. So I just wanted to clarify that so that there was no misunderstanding.
Thank you so much. I know you have a wealth of knowledge, and I really rejoice in all of your years dedicated to kind of, as finding a better relationship with the truth, right? Like trying to become closer and closer to a final view. And I really rejoice in the fact that you have, grind those sesame seeds into tahini, right? And try to turn it into something that, can be used for many things.
On the other hand, if I'd had fewer years for doing that, maybe I'd be a little happier too. But that's another conversation. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify that, because I don't, put myself like up here as this great teacher or whatever.
Thank you.
No, I thank you. So I'll talk to you soon.
Of course. Stasha.
Hello, and thank you for the teaching. Thank you, all the students, for showing up too. I think I've heard that story 1,000 times about Buddha seeing a hell being carrying a wagon and wanting to relieve his suffering. And I think tonight it kind of, in talking with vows and going to the next life and everything, I think I never thought about how, if he saw the suffering of one, how he, maybe it was with his previous familiarization with bodhicitta and relieving the suffering of all, but if he saw the suffering of one being and then he was hit on the head and became a bodhisattva, is that how he turned that, seeing the suffering of one into the great compassion and relieving the suffering of all?
Yeah, if we look at the 7-point cause and effect, where we recognize that all sentient beings have been our mothers and our fathers and our, best friends and our dogs and cats, all these relationships that we find so dear, and we remember that kindness, wish to repay their kindness. And then, have this experience of, wanting them to have happiness. We call that love, and it's through the force of attraction, meaning we're attracted to them because we, like a magnet now, because we see that they've been kind. We want to repay their kindness, so we're like magnetized to them to help them. And then this love through the force of attraction occurs where we want them to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And then that causes a reaction for this great compassion that wishes that beings be free from suffering and its causes. So in previous lives, when Buddha was meditating, the object of observation of that meditation that he did on love and compassion was all sentient beings. Because when we look at, the causes of bodhicitta and how that could have arisen in hell, just like that, right? We have to see that there was a maturation of mind that took place in previous lifetimes in order for the result of bodhicitta to occur. So this is, reading into it, but we can use other kinds of commentaries, how we could say that about emptiness, right? Once Arya Davis says, once you see the emptiness of one thing directly, you understand the emptiness of all. And then maybe it's something like that, where the bodhisattva is reminded, oh my, everyone, all sentient beings have suffering, right? And I wish that they were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I'll do it myself, right? So he grabs that cart, the extraordinary attitude, I'll do it myself. And the result of I'll do it myself, of hwaksam in Tibetan, is semche, is the bodhicitta. So that's how it would work. And the reason that the Buddha was in hell was because the bodhisattva is still, up until it says, there's debates about this, but bodhisattvas, even on the path of preparation, until the patient stage, have seeds that can ripen into hell realm rebirths, and still could have like a funny karma shift them down a wrong road for a second, right? And be in a lower realm, and then have an arisal take place. some debate this, but many, many great scholars talk about the ability before the path of preparation for this to occur. And then someone would debate and say, well, the Bodhisattva is doing it intentionally, right? And out of aspiration, because the Bodhisattva doesn't do anything for anyone but others. But how much power does he or she have is the question, and how much control does he or she have before he or she is an Arya and seen emptiness? So these are the things, sorry. Right? Yeah.
No, yeah, and I think, and that it was leading to, I also want, if we can in the future, discuss more about how when your vows continue through your next life. So since beginning this life, is it even possible that some of us have some latent vows that, you know, within our continuum already, or if we had those vows, we would be not ordinary beings?
Yeah, if we had the vows according to the text, right? So the debate goes back and forth, and everyone kind of settles on, if we have the vows, right? And we come in contact with the Mahayana, it's almost instantaneous that, you know, that will be Bodhisattva. Like, this is a tricky area, but I like tricky areas because then you'll go study, right? Then everyone will go like look in a million books, right? Like that's what I'm trying to figure out. And this is a sticky area for a Geshe Larampa too. But there is this idea that, you know, you could have a veil of some sort. And then because of previous karma, not likely. Let's start here. This is a very obscure potential. The Buddha wasn't a bodhisattva yet. So once you're a bodhisattva and you've got the engaged vow of bodhicitta, these are very obscure potentials that we're talking about. Mostly the bodhisattva is only doing good. We know that the time of death is what throws you kind of into your next causes and conditions. The bodhisattva is only doing things for others, only has virtue. The time of death, is there that same thing that's going to propel them potentially into a lower realm? That's what the debate is. Is that even possible? You know, maybe they have the seeds that could ripen into that, but you have to ignite them with a condition. And if the bodhisattva is not igniting them, you know, how are they giving rise to these experiences? So this is where it gets tricky. And it starts to be like, well, it's cool that we think that there could be a being that could do all of these things and have all of these things. But if you come in contact with the Mahayana in this life and you are a bodhisattva, you don't have a moment's thought about anything but getting sentient beings out of samsara. And you have some very, very special abilities, which would make me question this idea that you could possibly even have a veil, ever. So I also have to question it because there's this Tolku system that a lot of this logic springs out of. And it can kind of explain why you could have the rebirth of someone you've certainly, through divinations and special visions and clairvoyances of the greatest lamas in the world, decided that this child is the reincarnation of this special being. And then they turn out to be like a flunky, right? Like, how do you explain that if they were this great bodhisattva? So I sometimes question some kind of abstract things that don't make a lot of sense logically, but I can kind of get my hands around and stay open to. We always have to wonder where the point of view is coming from and always be searching for truth and not be saying, Tsongkhapa said it, Nagarjuna said. We really need to figure out if Nagarjuna said it and they say he's got the highest view, let's figure it out and bring our view there and see if it is or not. That's what this is about. I'm really enjoying the journey with all of you and really enjoying this process. And I hope that it's something that can, you know, flourish more Dharma, you know, that's it. Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I really appreciate you. And I know what we all just went through as students has been very, very hard. But I think that you're honoring Rinpoche, and I really appreciate you carrying us through this time, because all this is very hard. Buddhism is hard. And I'll be honest, like, I was lost. I was thinking like, this is too much for me. It's too hard. But that's not what Rinpoche would want. He would want us to continue, and he would want us to try to practice harder. So I, second what Priscilla said, and thank you for helping all of us through this.
Yeah, it's the only thing that's getting me like to a place of sanity, right? Is remembering like who Rinpoche was, remembering what if, he was a bodhisattva, what a bodhisattva is trying to do. A bodhisattva is trying to free sentient beings from suffering. And how does a bodhisattva do that? How does a Buddha do that? By teaching the Dharma. Did Rinpoche teach me the Dharma? Everything that when I'm walking around and I'm not just totally like in some other thing, I'm always thinking about the things Rinpoche told me and referencing texts. And I was saying to Lori earlier, like I can pick up, like I have all of these texts all over the library, and I don't know exactly what it says because I'm not that kind of a scholar yet, but I know exactly where to find all of these different points. And I can say, oh, I remember it's in this, even to like where the page it was, because Rinpoche just drilled this stuff into my mind, and like it's almost like it's downloaded in here, and it's really fun to play with it now. It's really fun to just kind of take this information and see, what do you really know, kid? Like listening to Rinpoche in my ear. What do you think you really know again? Like the time that I thought I was this Tibetan scholar and doing the Guru Puja, sitting down with Rinpoche on the floor, not on his throne. He and I are on the floor together. It's 1999-ish. I know a little Tibetan. I think I'm awesome. I think I'm awesome at everything, all the time, every time. I'm going to be like a famous singer, Buddha. I'm doing it all. And we're sitting down and I'm chanting the Guru Puja with him in the most beautiful way I think there ever was done, and I've been trained in singing, so I think it's just awesome. And at that time I had just been trained recently, so I'm like really like range worthy, and I'm doing all my stuff, and I'm following along with Rinpoche, and we get done with it and I put the book down like, job well done, man, I am awesome. And Rinpoche looks over at me and he goes, you really don't know any Tibetan whatsoever, do you? He was dead serious. I was ready for him to start laughing. He didn't. And he just stood up and went in his room and said, I went in there and I was like, you want some tea? And he's like, sure. And that was, a little bit of lesson in, what do you think you know? What was it that you thought you knew? And this is why I am so open. I've been talking with people in the nunneries and the monasteries, really just trying to find out who's who. The great geshes. There's a great geshe in Dragpa, Texas. There's a great geshe in Long Beach. All Rinpoche's generation at the Ganden Shartse Center. Great geshes around, and also I'm trying to figure out who the great geshes are in the youth, because the name geshe doesn't mean it's someone I want to learn from necessarily. That just is someone who got a degree. A lot of people have degrees. A lot of people got a piece of paper. Doesn't mean I want to learn from them. There are, really specific qualities that I would look for out of a teacher. I know how special Rinpoche was, and I know the lineage he gave me, that I would sit with many of those I wouldn't want to hear from, and not feel like they knew more. Rinpoche was a very good teacher. That's not bragging. But when you get into these other geshes, that's a totally different story. And when I say more, I mean like applying the Lam Rim to the teachings. They may have like 16 categories, 75 categories, 173 categories, and be able to be ba, 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 and do it just like that. That's how they know all the information. Like 173 categories of this, first 3 categories of this, first 4 categories of that. And that's how they've learned it. And they get this degree based on da, 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 da. And then they practice. And they practice these things that Rinpoche taught us about. Well, those categories really don't help you unless you know how to apply them to this pathway. And I want to find a teacher who knows how to do that. Rinpoche showed me how to do that. I can kind of explain how he was doing it, because I was watching it over 25 years and he was telling me how he did it. And the texts tell you how to do it. But yeah, I always would love to, and I do 3 times a week now, talk to Geshe-la. So I'm eager to learn more as well. Yes, Priscilla, and I'm sorry, we will get ended. I promised I'd end, and it's 9:13. And we didn't do dedication yet. I can't hear you.
I'm all set.
Okay, cool.
Dedication. Let's go.
Dedicate it up. Dedicate it up. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate that there's even like one person that wants to hear this kind of detailed information about bodhicitta. But I feel like it's so easy to be like, yeah, I'm a bodhisattva. You know, I heard a teaching in its other traditions that as soon as you decide you kind of want to do the Buddhist path, you're a bodhisattva. So like, well, what about next week? You know, I've seen like, then that means that I saw like impermanent bodhisattvas, like hundreds of them come through like over the last 25 years. That doesn't make any sense. It's got to be this really, really solid thing that's a result. It's got to be clearly definable if it's going to cause you to become a Buddha. If in the Madhyamika Avatar it says the Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas, the bodhisattvas are born from, you know, this and that and the other thing, we better know like what the, you know, that is. And we better be sure to know that that isn't just this simple thing that like, oh yeah, I like people. I'm a bodhisattva. She's a real bodhisattva. He's a real bodhisattva. We love saying those things, but when you get done with this course, you will bite your tongue before you'll say that. You'll say they're a good person. They'll say they seem altruistic, but saying someone's a bodhisattva is like, you know, a turtle popping its head through a donut that's been floating around, you know, and that turtle in the ocean, and the turtle comes up every million years or something. you know, that's how rare a bodhisattva really is. And at the end of Rinpoche's life, I said to him how nice it is that these people have been able to serve in the medical community and take care of a bodhisattva. And he looked me in the eye, and I don't want to say, I don't remember if I said Arya Bodhisattva or Bodhisattva. So I don't want to change the story. And I couldn't remember it like the next day, which I asked him because it was in Tibetan. But I said they get to, you know, see and help a bodhisattva. And he looked me right in the eye and said, yes. And for a long period of time, shaking and looking me straight in the eye. So we were witness to a being like that. And you all know that it's true. Anyone who spent any time with Rinpoche knows that he was just doing this for everyone else. He did whatever he had to do for everyone else. And his sole purpose was to free all of us. And not all of us on the screen, all of us in all realms. So we can't become so attached and say, our teacher, because he's all realms teacher. They all need that omniscient mind, that compassionate mind. So we've really got to share with all realms, because they all need Rinpoche. But Rinpoche, if you're listening, I would like you to come back as quickly as possible and share with us. You know, just disclaimer. But sometimes things aren't that easy, right? We have to have that karma and, you know, and so forth. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru. Real quickly, the reason we do this mandala offering is it's a Thanksgiving offering, saying like, thank you for the teaching. And when we're making the offering at the beginning of a request, we're imagining we're making that offering of a perfect universe to all the lineage, all the way back to Buddha. So it's not just whoever's sitting there talking. Whoever's sitting there talking better darn well have heard it from somebody talking to them, who heard it from someone talking to them. You know, it's not something original. So when you're making a mandala offering of a perfect universe, you're offering it to the pure lineage. And when you're done with a teaching and making an mandala offering, you're offering a pure universe, because there's not more to offer than that, right? Everything pure, as a thank you to the lineage. So that's what all of this is about. And this is just real quick in the middle. There's this kind of idea in Buddhist Cosmology, I think that's what you call it, where there's this Mount Meru and 4 continents, north, south, east, and west. So this is just a hand gesture that's symbolic of the universe, the way that one text, you know, really Basu Bandhu's text, where we find the Abhidharma Kosha, we find all of these explanations in other texts. But there are these 4 continents. We're in the southern continent. The world we're in is called the southern continent, supposedly. And there's this, you know, kind of Buddhist cosmology that even the Dalai Lama has said that, we can check with science, but everything in the, that exists, science doesn't see. They didn't see everything 50 years ago. And now what they didn't see that didn't exist now exists because they can see it, and so on and so forth. Yesterday's, not there is today's there. So we have to just kind of bear with it and say, okay, this is the hand gesture. It means this perfect universe. Vasubandhu says there's this Mount Meru in 4 continents that has the whole universe in it, that consumes it. And we're offering this perfect one, saying thank you to the lineage for allowing me to hear this teaching. And that's the point of this mandala offering. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Dragpa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful, Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray that we may quickly be reunited with Khenso Geshe Wandak, and that we will never be separated from him until we achieve the enlightenment that he came here to show us how to achieve. So I want to say thank you to everybody, and just remember, in the Shanti Deva's text, the reason that we're learning this is that all the misery of the world comes from self-cherishing. All happiness in the world comes from cherishing others. The Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas cherish others. We cherish ourselves. Look at the difference. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all so much.